Hey, and welcome, guys. As you see on the bench today, I have a Buck Rogers Starfighter, one of the old kits from Monogram, still wrapped in this plastic. Now, the story behind this is one of my viewers, Jeff. His name is Jeff. He contacted me on my YouTube channel. We started emailing him back, and he told me that he had got this kit and that he wanted it built similar to the one I had built a couple years ago, I guess now. 2 or 3 years ago, but I really don't like doing commissions. I sell my models occasionally. That's one thing to build and sell, but I really don't care to do commissions because I don't want my hobby to become a work or a job. However, he just, after talking to him a while, he just wanted to build straightforward with a nice clean build with a nice paint job and no lighting or modifications or anything. So I felt like that was, that I could do that pretty easily and hopefully give him a nice model. So he sent me this kit, and man, it's just I actually told him, "Are you sure you want to open this up? It's such a beautifully preserved kit." And his response is that he wants the beautifully done model to display. So I totally understand that part. So we're going to open this up. It looks great on the outside. See, I'm sure all the parts are in there. If you remember, I don't know if you, but when I built mine, I found the kit that had a kind of beat up open box, and almost all the parts are there. Just a couple little minor parts were missing that I really didn't need anyway. So there we go. We remove the plastic wherever not the same. Of course, everything's still wrapped. We got the cockpit, which canopy, the canopy glass. Looks in pretty good shape. Some little details in there, but I think we can clean that up to make that look nice and clear. Maybe put some kind of clearing agent on that, but that otherwise looks in good shape. Of course, we have all the parts. I think one of the key parts, there we go. All right, decals look in good shape, look like they've been covered, not exposed to any, because a lot of times you get yellowing on these decals, but these look in good shape. Hopefully they'll come out and we can go with those. If not, I have printed these before, so that's always an option to try to print that. I may scan these into a computer before I actually use them, so I'll have a backup. Of course, we have our instructions. It's a really basic model kit. The thing about this kit is just the fit of some of the parts, especially the back. There's a lot of seams and gaps that will have to be addressed, but otherwise it's a pretty nice kit. It comes out to a pretty nice model. Let me grab the one I built. If you don't recall, this is the one I built several years ago. And he said that he wants the exact same kind of paint job and weathering, just none of the lighting effects. So this one I actually took to Winterfest, and they did get a bronze award. And Fine Scale Modeling website put it up on with their group of models from Winterfest. So that was quite the honor. So now I have some things I have done to this one. Of course, this one's modified. It had lighting for the engines, and I did a complete modification of the cockpit dashboard. There were some 3D printed parts in there, some fiber optics, things like that. We'll just be painting it up. I did throw in a few extra decals here and there just to kind of give it some visual interest. I'll have to talk to Jeff, see if he wants that same kind of thing. But really, I remember like right in here, just not fitting well and having to do a lot of just sanding down to make that look uniform. I remember some pretty good, where this comes together, pretty significant seam lines that'll have to be addressed. But just since we're just building it and not doing modifications, it'll be a lot simpler, just a matter of getting it all together. So that's the goal. I'll probably rewatch my video of that build, thankfully, because they used all the same colors there. I remember it being kind of off-white color. And so I'm excited for the build. So first things first, I'll probably open this up and start getting the engine nozzles together. So let's just get started. All right, just showing the progress here. I first started off putting together the engine nozzles, which was, of course, 3 pieces here, and painting them. I first did a primer coat over that, then a black base coat, and then I airbrushed on this DecoArt Zinc, which has a kind of a nice metallic looking color to it. And then I took some Testors Transparent Blue paint and airbrushed the nozzle there. I also did some dry pastels to darken in some of these areas right here to give it kind of some color modulation, some charring from the heat of the engine going on. I also did a little bit of this silver leaf rub and buff to kind of get inside here of the engine nozzle, and you can kind of see where I just took a brush and lightly dry brushed a little bit engine nozzle and a little bit on some of the edges, not too hard on that. So pretty pleased with how that's looking and coming out. I've also went ahead and painted up the cockpit. So it's really basic cockpit, just kind of painting up the seat and a couple of tones of gray here. Now for the instrument panel, I took some little like decorative, almost like these large glitter pieces, and super glued them in there. And then I took some resin, this UV resin right here, and with a toothpick, just put a few drops over those pieces, and then you take of course, a black light and then harden that, and so it gives a nice kind of glass panel look to it. It's not going to be terribly visible. It's a very limited view of the cockpit inside the glass here. As you can see on the top section of the ship, I've installed the canopy glass, and I just glued that in with some super glue on the edges, and then a little bit of hot glue just on the front and back, just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And then, of course, the seat will now go into place like that, and I will glue it in there. And so that's all you're really going to see from the seat. You can just barely make out that instrument panel, but when the light hits those reflective pieces that I put in there, it does kind of give it a little bit of interest to it and a little bit of life to it. But otherwise, I'm going to be installing that. I'm going to, once I get that in there, I need to mask off the canopy glass to start protecting that. And I can join up the top and bottom of the fuselage. I've also, the bottom fin sections are 2 pieces. I've glued those together, and just working on removing the seam lines from the worst ones is on this outer edge. The sides aren't too bad, it's a little bit clean up. You got a little bit right here. This part is visible as when it goes into the body, and it does have a little notches, so you can see how it's supposed to go in there. Like this one actually goes on this side, and it's notched. So, but you can see right here that that part is actually a little bit visible. You'll have an engine nozzle like right in here, but so make sure you clean that seam line right there before you start gluing everything together. Basically, there's a few other little pieces, I think, but basically this section will go in here, and I think you do that first before you join. You have to look at the instructions. But then once we get those together, it's just going to be attacking those gaps and seams, mostly in the 2 sides right here is the worst. Also, if I remember from my previous build, a lot of sanding to get rid of kind of how this comes in here. I remember, I think this goes like, nope, it's like this. Oh yeah, there's a piece that goes right in here. I forget exactly how this goes in, but it's not a great fit as I remember. So gonna be a lot of work on that. So once I get this all together, we'll come back and look at that. All right, after a lot of body work, here's where I'm at. Of course, I glued the top and bottom. You can see where I've masked off the canopy glass here. I glued the top and bottom. I've also added in this rear section here. So just a lot of work. These seams right here, actually pretty much all the way around the ship. because it comes on the inside all the way around. You're going to have a noticeable seam, and they're not going to line up. And I actually replaced where these guns, there's a seam right down the middle, so it wasn't really looking all that good. So I sanded that out, or actually grinded that out, and took a piece of sprue that I found that was about the same diameter as the Top Gun, and cut a piece and glued that into there to give that a little bit better look. I lost some raised detail right here from all the sanding, so I took some very thin styrene and added that on to give it back a little bit more detail. Right here, you're going to have issues all the way around where this piece fits in, this piece glues in, and you can see the line at the moment, but yeah, I think it's pretty well filled and covered. The parts around here to connect the engine nozzles, there's quite a big lip on both sides, top and bottom, though the bottom's not going to be quite as noticeable, and it's kind of flat. It's a little bit easier. A lot of sanding around the edges of the wings, just all the way around. Pretty much 360, plan on doing a lot of detail. Pretty much I just used a little like medium thickness super glue for minor imperfections to kind of fill in the gap, and then some sanding sticks and some sanding paper. I then just kind of go at it, smoothing it out. So from here we need to put on a primer coat so I can see how visible these lines are now, because they feel pretty smooth, but primer always kind of shows you what work you need to do. But it's coming together. This is a major hurdle, getting all of this together and just cleaning it up and making it look nice. And of course, I'll put the wings on later because I'm going to need to do some masking off, and those are going to get in the way. And I think I can just glue those in later and they will look fine. So that's where I'm at. And so time for priming. All right, so as you can see here, a lot's been done since my last segment of it. What I have done is, once I did all the body work to our fighter, I then applied a primer coat, and I used this Iron Armor sandable primer, and I get these at Harbor Freight for $5 or $6 a can. It goes on good and it lays down smooth. It's sandable, wet sandable, all that kind of stuff. So I found it to be a very good primer. I've never had issues with it. From there, I went into our base coat. For the actual base coat, I used my airbrush and this Vallejo Model Air USAF light gray. I know that on the show it comes kind of across a little white, but when I've done one of these before, and when I do it and I did it in a pure white, and just something about it comes across kind of weird and toyish. So often when I do a whitish color, I do something with a little bit of gray in it, which is what this light gray USAF is. It has that just a little bit of gray in it and tones it down. And I think it gives a more realistic look, at least as far as looking at it. So I did that as the base coat. At the time, I had the engines off. I kept the bottom wing sections down or off of the model. They're easy just to kind of glue into position. But I did my base coat, and then I started doing some masking off. And probably the most complex part is these two gray sections right here. Now for my grays, I did a Vallejo Mecha Color Gray Z, which is kind of a light to medium gray. Here it comes out on this color, more of a medium gray. But a lot of masking off, tricky masking off, should I say. Not a lot. There's some other little sections that are pretty simple, some triangles, section on the bottom that I did. But here, if you really look, let's see if I can cut down the glare, the way the canopy comes over, it kind of L's, and it just has to cut these really small strips to make it fit in there. Some zigzagging over here in the mid canopy. We have some little kind of square pieces in and out, so a little bit of time to mask it off, but it's really, once you get that's kind of the hardest part of the masking. So I did all the grays. I did the bottom of the ship right there, and that gray, a little bit of masking off, not too complex. A little bit on the wings, as you can see here, the leading edge and the flaps on the back of the lower parts of the wings on those and on the back. So masked those off and did it in that gray Z. And then I masked off some other panels and sections to give it a little bit of variation and give the interest, and it helps bring the scale, like makes the ship, again, when you start paneling it out. If you look at any kind of fighter, you're going to see paneling colors and stuff. Now it's a sci-fi fighter, so there's a little bit more leeway. But even for these, I use what's called white gray, and that comes out really white, even though this says white gray. So you have some of these colors, you just have to kind of experiment with them. But when you look at them, they come out a certain way. This comes off still not that really stark white, but mostly white, I guess you would say. A couple sections up front, back here. As you can see, there's a little square panel that had raised panel lines around it. On the wing sections over here, there's a couple parts underneath. On the bottom wings, there is a panel that's, again, raised section that I masked off and painted those. So once I got all that done, I, of course, let it dry and assembled, attached the wings, attached our engines, and super glued those in place, so everything's now in place. And I've since put a gloss clear coat for our next section. Now for the gloss clear coat, I use this clear acrylic gloss. I got this at Hobby Lobby, and it's $8 for this big can, but I like that it's an acrylic. I'm more familiar with acrylics, and I think it's a little bit more harsh, or less harsh than some of the other stuff, especially since I'm using acrylic paints. So letting that dry, that's been drying for a little bit. I'm going to let it dry longer. And from there, I'm going to just start doing some weathering. And basically, I'm just going to be doing some panel line, using some oil, well, not really washes, but basically an oil wash to get some of these recessed panel lines in here. Probably using a dark gray, not really black. I don't want to go too stark. I need to use some pastels to darken in some of these areas, mostly around the gun, some of these vented areas. I'm going to keep the weathering somewhat light on this one, and we have to put our decals on. So I'll need to put, there's only a few 4 decals, but I may put some more smaller decals. So I'll have to look through my decal set to give a little bit more visual interest, like I did my own Starfighter, Buck Rogers Starfighter. I had some other decals in there, so gotta put those on. And yeah, I don't know if I talked about the base. Now the base, this is this little triangle and stand right here is part of the kit supplied base. And this little plastic piece that I made this in, I designed this in Tinkercad, which is a free online 3D program. Kind of basic, but you can do a lot of things. I shaped it out and did the raised leathering, and then printed it on my filament printer, my Elegoo Neptune Pro. And of course, a little call so they'll know who made it. But I think that turned out pretty good. I spray painted it with a dark gray primer paint and used a chrome pen to fill in the letters. So I think that turned out simple but nice. I didn't worry about sanding away some of the texture here from the filament printer because I actually think it gives visual interest to my display base. It's not just some smooth plastic piece. You can see the layer lines, but in this case I think it actually looks kind of good. So I left it there and glued the kit part on top. And so you'll be able to remove the Starfighter on and off. And it sits quite nicely on that. So anyway, when I come back, we'll look at the finished model. All right, well, here is the finished Buck Rogers Thunderfighter or Starfighter from Monogram. First, I want to thank Jeff for entrusting me with the build of his model. I enjoyed the build. It was nice to come back to this. One of my favorite things about this old show, the show itself doesn't really hold up very well if you ever go back and watch it. But some of the models and things they did was very cool. And I think coolest one was this Starfighter. So very cool design. The model itself is pretty basic. There's a lot of seam work and things of that nature. But when you get all that done, I think it turns out to be a very nice looking ship. So I finished up putting, was able to use the kit decals. Just had to be kind of gentle with them and use some setting solution to get those on. But they did go on without too much work. And then I added in a few of my own little decals similar to my own build of this Starfighter. Just a little things like danger exhaust, a few little things here, and a couple up in the cockpit, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a realistic look. I did do a little bit of Panaline accent color, just some medium grays along some of these inset panel lines, and just to bring those out and bring out the detail of the model. I used a little bit of dry pastels to darken in some of these areas, most notably where the guns are at, to kind of give some scorching where the guns are at, around some of these vents, and a little bit around the exhaust. Some fairly light, but enough to give character to the model to make it look like it's actually been flown and been in use. And after that, I just did a matte clear coat over all of it to lock in the pastels and protect some of the other things, the paint job. And finally, I removed the masking tape off of the canopy glass and then cleaned that up with some Q-tips and a little alcohol to clean the plastic. The plastic's probably the worst part of this model. It's not super clear, and just had some issues, but it's mostly looks good and not terrible at all. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video, and until next time, everybody have a good one.